Good Tuesday afternoon to you. It's 4 o'clock. Time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. Regular season preparation week underway. That means Tuesday, the Browns players have the day off as they get ready for the season opener against the Carolina Panthers down in Carolina. Some news off the field. Browns did, in fact, bring in a tight end. Jeremy Fowler tweets this out. Browns have agreed to terms. Free agent Jesse James to be on the 53-man roster. 1 year deal. You see his career numbers: 157, 15, 22, 12 touchdowns. And as Fowler notes, good tight end 3 option behind Njoku and Bryant. Browns are also signing an offensive lineman, Joe Haeg. Right tackle Jack Conklin working his way back from the knee surgery. Haeg provides depth at tackle. He can also play guard, as Mike Garafolo tweets that out. Now, Haeg had 39 starts and has played in 72 NFL games. So a guy that has been through some of the NFL wars. Let's welcome in Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram as well as BrownsZone.com, Scott Petrak. Scott, what do you make of these two signings? What do they mean just in your mind?
Yeah, if you start with Jesse James, you know, the Browns needed his third tight end. It was kind of a glaring lack of, or a glaring hole on that in the roster. You know, they only had Njoku and Bryant, so you knew they would do something, and James makes sense. He's a veteran. He's more of a blocker than a receiver, but he gives Kevin Stefanski the option to run those 3 tight end sets that we know he loves. We know he's used a ton in the past, and I think we all thought he was going to get away from those this year with Deshaun Watson, but with Jacoby Brissett, you could see a lot more 2 and 3 tight end sets, and James is a better blocker than Bryant. And then Haeg, you know, it makes me question if Jack Conklin's going to be ready for Sunday against Carolina. Kevin Stefanski wasn't, said he still had a chance when we talked to him Monday. It's going to depend on how he stacks days. Chris Hubbard also sat out the last couple of weeks of practice before returning Monday. Stefanski insisted it was only rest, but you wonder just how good they feel about Conklin and Hubbard, and that's why they went and got Haeg.
Yeah, and the flip side of it is it makes you realize how much of a reach it was last year when you had your 4th and 5th tackles that really didn't have a lot of NFL experience. That's why you go out and get a guy who has played in 70-some NFL games. All right, let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one about a concern this viewer has with the Browns.
My name is Howard. I'm from Marin County. Just a couple thoughts. My first thought is this, is that if the Browns do not solidify the interior of their line, they're going to get killed. I don't see how they'll ever be a top 10 defense if they can just run on them all the time, circa like Najee Harris did last year. So that is really, really bothering me. The other thing I would say is that if you look at the team that was excellent was from John Dorsey, and as the John Dorsey people fade away, I believe the team will be worse and worse and worse. So the Harvard boys are smart, but I don't think they're that smart. So I predict that the Browns will win less than 8 games this year, maybe 6. I think if Jack Conklin doesn't play right tackle, that Jacoby Brissett might get killed. I think that now having a substitute, for the center, in Posick, that's not a good thing. So, it could be pretty ugly. Thanks for everything. Think you're doing a great job. Have a nice day. Bye.
All right, as always, appreciate all the voicemails. All right, there's a lot there. The interior of the defensive line concerns me. As far as the John Dorsey era versus the Andrew Berry era, I don't know about that. I'm not in agreement with that.
Yeah, the D tackles, we've talked about that a ton, Dave. There just isn't any experience. They're not quality experience. They're really counting on Jordan Elliott to carry that group, and he played a lot his first few years, but had minimal impact. Now, I know he had a great offseason, and I talked to him, and he's rededicated and found commitment, but he's still unproven. And then Taven Bryan, the Jaguars just let him go, a former first-round pick, and we know the Jaguars are loaded with talent. And then you get Tommy Togiai, who barely played last year, and then rookie Perion Winfrey. So I think that's a legitimate concern. Now, I think the Browns would tell you that they have enough to stop the run and that they're going to be really good against the pass, so it'll all balance out. But I understand the caller's concern, especially when you're playing teams that can run the ball like Pittsburgh and Baltimore. The Barry Dorsey thing's interesting. There's good and bad from both of them. I think John Dorsey did some good things. He also had some big misses. And I think Andrew Berry, while he's still, he's only in his 3rd year, has done some good things well. Has kept some quality talent to long-term contracts. But you got to question some of the draft picks, and it's still early. But is Jed Wills going to live up to that number 10 pick a couple of years ago? As of now, I would say he hasn't. But this is a big year for him. Anthony Schwartz, we know how many balls he dropped in the preseason, and the question marks there. So I think there's good and bad from both, and I actually think the combination of the two, their rosters kind of melded, has given this team a chance to be pretty good.
Yeah, the overall talent seems to be there. At least the people that cover it locally think that. So it'll be interesting to see. You had a one-on-one with Jacoby Brissett, and I know you're working on that article. What's your takeaways from that?
Yeah, there were two. The biggest one was, it kind of feels like he's in this really difficult spot, right? Taking over for Deshaun Watson. He's going to have to give the job back when Watson comes off suspension. But Brissett made it clear to me that he chose this, that he wanted the opportunity to start. He didn't know at the time how many games it would be, right? Because he signed in March. And for a while it looked like 6, and then winds up being 11. But he really wanted the opportunity. And the second point is he feels like his career is just getting going. He said, hey, I've had a good story to this point, right? Drafted by the Patriots, played in week 3 when Brady was suspended, went to Indy and filled in 2 years for Andrew Luck. But he says, hey, I'm only 29. He feels like his story is just getting going, and the best parts haven't been told yet. So I know there's a lot about a doubt about Brissett, and I understand that completely. But he just would tell you differently, and he's optimistic that he can do really well given another chance to start.
We kind of brushed on this a little bit earlier. My thought is the offense is going to look a whole lot like it did last year with Baker Mayfield, just in terms of the look and the feel and how you have to play. Do you get that sense?
I do. I think you're going to see a lot of running, a lot of play action. Jacoby Brissett, I think, takes less chances, fewer chances than Baker Mayfield did. Just watching him in the training camp, he likes to throw the ball underneath. To me, the key will be, and Andrew Berry said on one of the preseason broadcasts, that they like what Jacoby Brissett can do from a play-action shot game. And that means when they, pretend to hand off to Nick Chubb or Kareem Hunt, he keeps the ball and he throws deep downfield. And if Brissett can have success doing that, number one, it will loosen up the defense. And number two, it leads to explosive plays. And those are missing last year in the passing game, except for like that Cincinnati game, which was the Browns' best game of the year. So if he can hit a couple of those a game and loosen up the defenses, then I think the Browns have a chance to make it work. Because I don't think Jacoby Brissett's going to turn the ball over, which is a huge key and number one on Kevin Stefanski's priority list, and something that Baker Mayfield struggled with at times.
Yeah, and again, he doesn't have to make plays. He has to make 3 or 4 critical plays in a game, and that's usually what an NFL game comes down to. I know you've also written about this. David Njoku, his role in the offense, and how much the Browns are counting on him.
Yeah, it's interesting. David Njoku doesn't have the production to deserve the contract he got, right? 4 years, almost $55 million. But the Browns believe he's still got incredible potential. They handed over the number 1 tight end role to him and cut Austin Hooper. And I think when you look at this passing game, right, there's Amari Cooper, and then there's a bunch of question marks. So I don't think it's a stretch by any means to think that David Njoku could be the number 2 target of Jacoby Brissett. And if he's that, and if he can hang on to the ball, which has always been a question mark, he's inconsistent catching some of those easy passes, then you could see David Njoku really make an impact. And we talked to him Monday, and he's ready for it. He's ready for the responsibility of being the number 1 tight end. He's ready to be on the field like every snap, and he's ready for the opportunities. And he said you could tell during preseason in the training camp that he was going to get a bunch of chances.
Do you think it's fair to think that Kevin Stefanski, Andrew Berry are thinking, all right, the wide receiving core, you got Cooper, and then there's some question marks, but you have David Njoku, that's a guy you can throw the ball to. You have Kareem Hunt, that's a guy you can throw. Do they kind of view it maybe as pass catchers relative to wide receivers per se?
I do. I think especially without Deshaun Watson, right? Because you expect Watson to kind of lift everybody else, but I think that's asking a lot from Jacoby Brissett. So, yeah, I think you go Amari Cooper, David Njoku, Harrison Bryant, Kareem Hunt, Demetric Felton, right, this running back who's actually a receiver. I think it's all about, how can you get, 20, 25 completions a game. And, yeah, I think that's how they want to do it or how they're going to do it. but that's not ideal, number one, right? You need some threats on the outside, which is receivers. And number two, David Njoku hasn't shown that he can do it at a really high level. Now, the Browns are confident he can, but he still needs to show that. If not, then you kind of have Amari Cooper, Kareem Hunt. And as good as Kareem Hunt is, you don't want him being your number 2 receiver.
That's fair enough. Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram. You can also read him on brownzone.com. We're going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we'll head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports for CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
We continue talking Browns here on Sports for CLE. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one about how the Browns season lays out.
Yeah, Dave, this is your boy from Vegas. And I was sitting there listening to your program, and callers was absolutely right about giving up on the season. And I think that people don't understand or not taking into consideration that, he'll be going for 11 games, but of those 11 games, would probably be half of those games, or close to half, in some pretty Cleveland favorable weather, if you get my drift. So I think where, some of those teams will be better than us, we'll have an advantage because we'll have the Cleveland Browns stadium and the weather. Go Browns.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Scott, the first half of the schedule is the first 4 games are a little bit easier. Gets progressively tougher as you go on, but playing at home with a backup, in Jacoby Brissett I'm referring to as a backup quarterback, going down the road with a backup quarterback is always more difficult, and I think 6 of the first 11 are at home.
Yeah, that helps, but they have to get off to a good start, David. I know that's a lot of pressure to put the team under and Jacoby Brissett under, but it's hard to come up with a scenario where they go 1-3 or 2-2, and all of a sudden they find a way to win a bunch of games when the schedule gets a lot harder. You're talking Tampa Bay and the Chargers and the Bengals and the Ravens. It's just a really hard schedule. So I do think it's imperative to get off to a good start. I do think it helps to be at home. If you don't have your whole team, you don't have your starting quarterback, it's easier to win at home. Maybe the crowd can help you make one more play to beat a team like Cincinnati on Monday night, right? So I think that's legitimate. It just feels like they're going to have to find a way to win a game or two that they're not favored to, that they're not supposed to, whether that's, against Cincinnati or against Tampa Bay or whatever it is. You got to figure out a way to get to 6 wins, I think, before Deshaun Watson comes back, because it's asking too much for him to run the table when he hasn't played in 700 days.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fair, and I would agree with you. All right, Pro Football Focus. One positional matchup to watch in every game week 1. And the positional matchup for the Browns, Myles Garrett against the first-round tackle, Ekwani from North Carolina State. Baker Mayfield facing his old team, the obvious headline event in this game. But how rookie left tackle holds up against Myles Garrett could be the biggest determining factor on how Mayfield actually fares. And again, he's an early first-round pick. How important is it that the Browns exploit that matchup?
Yeah, it's huge. And I wrote a couple stories about him today out of Carolina, and it didn't sound like he had a great training camp. And maybe that's to be expected from a rookie. But there's a lot of talk about how they hope he gets better throughout the season, and there are hiccups. And, if you're Myles Garrett and you're thinking about that and you're seeing that, I think you just have to, see blood in the water, smell blood in the water. And that could be a matchup that decides the game. It really could, because if Carolina is worried about him at left tackle, then maybe they roll Baker right a bunch, which leads to a condensed field and he's throwing into a bunch of traffic. Or it sets up for Jadeveon Clowney to have a big day. I just think, Carolina cannot afford to let Myles Garrett wreck the game. So if they have to put 2 or 3 bodies on him, then that reduces the number of people that Baker has out in routes to throw to. It could really kind of slant the game. And the fact is, Baker Mayfield knows how good Myles Garrett is. And I'm sure he will look every snap to make sure that he's not going to come get him.
Yeah, I would agree. You also had a chance to sit down with Myles. What were your takeaways from that, and what did you find out where he is at?
Yeah, there's so much to talk about when you sit down with Myles, right? You could talk about a million things. But a couple of the things we went over was, to me, it feels like he puts so much on himself. And, he's only one guy, right? It's like a helpless feeling. You don't have Deshaun Watson. And Myles talks about the defense, pitching shutouts. And he just said he's taken so much upon himself because that's what he feels is necessary. And he's up for the challenge, and he's trying to find kind of every avenue where he can improve his game. If they're throwing quick hitches to keep him from getting to the quarterback, then he's got to bat a bunch of passes down. If they're running at him to slow him down, then he's got to stop the run. He's really committed to doing all he can to put his team in the best position to win, number one. I remember when Myles came out, we talked about all these other interests he had, and those haven't gone away. But I always kind of got the sense that, he would have kind of a shorter career and then be done with it because he had other stuff to do. But talking to him, I got a different impression, and I asked him, and he said he talked about playing for 10 more years, like just kind of conversationally. And I said, well, do you have another contract or 2 in you? He's only starting that second contract. And he said he's got at least 1 more in him, which to me means he's going to be here another 7 or 8 years, which is a long time. And I think that fans would be glad to hear that. And the last thing was he just talked about his relationship with Jadeveon Clowney and how it's really combustible. Like it's 2 alphas that are physical specimens. They're really competitive and aggressive. And I think that has a chance to really help this defensive line if those 2 guys play like they did last year.
Yeah, and just kind of snowball and build on each other without question. All right, before we let you go, Matt Rule talked about the hype around Baker Mayfield and playing the Browns.
Hype isn't around Baker here. I mean, hype's around Christian McCaffrey and Shaq Thompson and Dante Jackson and all those guys. Baker's, 1 of 53, but he is our quarterback. We are certainly going to rally around him. And, I want Baker to be Baker. I don't want him to be anything else other than what he is. But this is a game of 11 guys executing together, and we want to be connected as a team. So to us, this is about offense, defense, and special teams. This is about a rookie left tackle having to go out and play against one of the premier players in the game. This is about our defense facing 2 of the preeminent running backs in the game. There's a lot of storylines in this one. So. Right now today was, we're really still focused on us. Obviously we're studying Cleveland, but things that we feel like we have to improve to have a chance in the game. So we're excited. I'm excited to see Baker play for the first time, but I'm excited to get Christian back out there and many, many more.
Scott, it's good that he wants Baker to be Baker because I don't think Baker's going to be anything other than that anyway. There's not much Matt Rule can say other than what he did.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see how Baker handles this, right? Like, I think we've talked about it. I thought he would say something inflammatory before the game. And I know there was that dust up last week or whenever it was. But that wasn't him to, the media. He wasn't stand in front of reporters and say something about the Browns. And now I think he might not. Like, he's been really playing stuff close to the vest, which is kind of against Baker's, Baker's nature. But, it's probably best off. And I'm sure Carolina doesn't want him, poking the bear of the Browns. But when we get to Sunday, if Baker hasn't said anything before Sunday, you just expect something, right? Especially if it's going well for him. We saw what he did to Hugh. Remember when Hugh Jackson went to work for the Bengals, right? And there was a lot of friction there before the game and the handshake and all that kind of stuff. I could see him staring down Kevin Stefanski or staring down the sideline. I don't think anything's off the table, assuming Baker's playing well. If he struggles, then it's going to be interesting to see how he handles that too. Yeah,
either way, it will not lack for intrigue, if you will. Scott Petrak, as always, appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Scott.
Thanks, Dave.
All right, Scott Petrak, make sure you read him. Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, as well as his stuff is on brownzone.com on the internet. Tom Withers, Browns and Cavs reporter from the Associated Press. Straight ahead, we continue talking Browns here on Sports4CLE. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
Maybe cliche, but there's no I in team. The only identity that matters is we. The collective effort to love thy neighbor is needed now more than ever. The responsibility behind pronouns such as I, me, and mine impact we, us, and ours. So understand that you make all the difference in the team. He, him, her, or she can't disturb our peace, since we control our destiny as student athletes. This is the power of pronouns.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns here on Sports4CLE. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one about how the national media is viewing the Browns and the upcoming season.
Hey, fellas. Just looked over a column on NFL.com where 25 of their expert reporters made predictions for the playoff teams for 2022. Could not believe it when not one of them picked the Browns to make the playoffs. For instance, in the AFC North, they had 15 picking Baltimore to win the division, 10 for Cincinnati. 3 of them actually picked Pittsburgh as a 7th seed wildcard team. They also had 3 picking Carolina as a 7th seed wildcard team. Just happens to be Baker's team. If I'm Coach Stefanski, I'm printing this one off and covering it with the team. Joe Patonio said it best, it's us against the world, or it sure feels like it anyway. Hey, any thoughts would be welcomed. Go Browns!
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Let's welcome in Tom Withers, longtime Cleveland reporter for the Associated Press. Tom, is it just me, or is there and I get you're going to be playing 11 games with a backup quarterback, so that shows you how much value there is in the belief in a quarterback. But it sure seems like the national media is down on the Browns, if you will.
Yeah, Dave, we have no idea what to really expect for these 11 games, right? I mean, it's going to be very interesting to say the least. So, could I see them going 7-4? Could I see them going 4-7? Yeah, I mean, one is as possible as the other. I'm not going to second guess a lot of my national colleagues. They see things sometimes in a different lens than we do, but just in doing my preview last week, I had the Browns finishing 3rd in the AFC North, which, arguably is the best division in football. So it's going to be it's going to be tough. It's going to be really interesting to see how they come out of these first 4 games, which are, it's basically the softer part of their schedule. So if they can come out of there with 3 wins or maybe 4, that could change people's outlook as far as the 11 games without Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, and again, the not having your starting quarterback is a big deal. Let's continue on this. This is again CBS Sports, and here's their projected finish for every team. And just run it down. I'll make it easy for you. Ravens 12-5, Bengals 11-6, Steelers 8-9. And they have the Browns going 6-11, the same as the Washington Commanders, and a couple of other teams. Tom, for the Browns to only win 6 games, there would have to be a lot of things that go wrong. I'm
with you.
I mean, you still have Nick Chubb, you still have Kareem Hunt, you still have the center of that line is pretty good with Bitonio and Teller at the guards. You still have Myles Garrett, you still have Jadeveon Clowney, and you still have a really good secondary. When you go through it position group by position group, 6 wins seems awfully light.
I would agree with that, Dave. I think that's the low end of what I would forecast the Browns doing. Now, do I think they're going to go 11-6? No, but I see them a little bit closer to probably 500. And again, it's all going to depend in a lot of ways on how Brissett plays. Are they able to, first of all, run the ball effectively, stay healthy, which is a huge thing. There's a potential that Jack Conklin could be back this week, which would be big for that offensive line that you just mentioned a couple of minutes ago as still as one of the, the better things about this Browns team. The defense is going to be a lot better. I like the linebackers. They're fast. The secondary is great. There's still some issues on the inside on the defensive line, but I'm with you. I think they have enough that they can get themselves to 9 or 10 wins. Again, if Brissett plays better than we expect, if you get production out of not only Njoku, but this wide receiving group that has everybody concerned as well, with the exception of Amari Cooper, a very unproven group as well. So, again, get out of those first 4 games looking better, and then, you can start talking about maybe 10 or 11 wins.
Yeah, and again, it's Jacoby Brissett has to make a couple of plays each game and not put themselves in. As long as the Browns don't put themselves in 2nd and 3rd and long with Brissett, they can survive. One more of this, and then again, it's nobody believes in the Browns syndrome here. These are Pro Football Talk Week 1 power rankings, and the Browns are at 21. And the company they're keeping is not. Now, in fairness, they also have the Broncos down low, the Dolphins, the Patriots, the Chargers, who are some people's picks to be elite there. So in fairness, that's kind of where they're looking at it. Let me ask you this. When you look at Jacoby Brissett and compare the quarterback play relative to what the Browns got a season ago, nobody would tell you that Baker Mayfield played well last year. But they still found a way to win 8 games. And this roster is probably a little bit better than it was a season ago.
I agree.
Is that fair? Is it fair to think you're kind of in that range?
Yeah, it's interesting. Thank God, by the way, Dave, they're playing this week, right? So all these rankings out the window a little bit. At least we'll have a better sense of what teams are. When you just showed that graphic before, I think the Saints are a really solid team, and I think they had them ranked, 1 above the Browns there. So, yeah, listen, it's not going to be easy. The Browns have put themselves in this position by signing Deshaun Watson. They've got a guy who I think is a very competent, underrated starter in Jacoby Brissett. I mean, he's had the experience of doing this in New England and Indianapolis, and basically shared starts last year with Tua down in Miami. So he's been through this before. And then in talking to him last week, he's a very confident guy. He believed, he came here because he wanted the challenge of this. He felt like he was up for it. And, the Browns, in doing their research, found out what a great leader he is. And we've seen that even in the short time that he's been here. He's really been a steadying presence for a team that had a difficult summer, to say the least, right? So I think it's going to be all about him. And I think the good thing too, Dave, is that, like you mentioned before, the easiest pass for him to make is going to be that short pitch to number 24 and watch him run.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with being a game manager when you have a lot of parts on offense that can do things. All right, before we go to break, Matt Rule, Panthers head coach, was asked, did he talk to Baker Mayfield about Baker not letting his emotions get the best of him? Here's Panthers head coach Matt Rule.
I've seen nothing that tells me that I haven't seen anything that says, hey, I'm going to let my emotions get the best of me. He's locked in and in the moment. I think everybody that's here understands the standards for how we want to be. At the end of the day, it's never about you. It's never about me. It's always about us. It's always about the team. It's always about winning. Winning comes first. So, whether that's a guy in training camp reaching the ball across the goal line and me calling everybody up, or whether that's a guy being late, it's always about the team. It's always about winning. So Baker, to me, embodies that. He comes to things his own way. He's a very competitive guy, very fiery guy. But, I mean, he's the stories you hear and the stories I certainly heard are not what I see. I mean, he's a true professional. And that's what everyone that I talked to about him said about him. So I think he's a great teammate, a great leader. I think our guys are going to rally around him, not just this game, but every game.
And again, it just adds to the intrigue of that week one, Tom.
Yeah, Coach, that's a very similar news conference to what we saw here for a long time, wasn't it? Unfortunately for Baker doesn't listen to many people. So you would hope for his sake that he has learned some of the lessons over the last couple of years here, and he's going to, comport himself a little bit differently down there. I have my doubts about that, but we did see times where, and let's not forget to take the Browns to the playoffs a couple of years ago. We did see times where he was a good leader when it wasn't all about Baker, and that he was leading by example and not by just, running his mouth and what have you. I think unfortunately for Baker, he got hurt last year, and I think, had he and the Browns could do it all over again, he probably would have sat out and got that surgery. And, we may have a very different situation than we have here right now. So, yeah, boy, it adds spice to week one. I can't remember an opener that's had this much buzz about it.
Yeah, it will be interesting for sure. Tom Withers and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we'll talk more about the Browns. Also dive into that Cavs trade that was made last week. Sports4CLE, we'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to OhioLottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
We continue talking Browns with Tom Withers, reporter for the Associated Press here in the Cleveland area. Tom, the defensive line, especially the interior, the tackles, the inside, how concerned are you? It wasn't great in preseason, but Jadeveon Clowney, Myles Garrett also didn't play.
Yeah, that's got a lot to do with it. I tend to really disregard about 90% of what I see in preseason, to be honest with you, Dave. I mean, teams are being, very vanilla when they're out there. They're not going to tip their hands about any kind of schemes on either side of the ball. So, Yeah, there's question marks on the inside. There's no doubt about that. I mean, I've been impressed with this Bryan kid. Perrion Winfrey has shown flashes. It's time for Tommy Togiai to take that step up after kind of getting a redshirt year last year. And then, Jordan Elliott has been a guy that everybody has brought up, especially his teammates throughout camp, as, potentially a guy that could have a breakout year. And we have seen flashes out of him as well. So, yeah, I think if you're going to identify kind of a weak spot on the team in general, I would have to say it would be the interior of the defensive line. But to your point before, when you've got those two beasts on the outside, that can make up for a lot of different things. And I think as importantly, to be honest with you, Dave, is having, a healthy Jacob Phillips on the inside and that secondary as well. So, it's an area of concern, I would say, but I would say, nothing to be overly, frightened about going into week one.
So with Jacoby Brissett as the quarterback, how do that Browns have to play to be successful? And who are some guys, under the radar? We know Nick Chubb. Who are some guys that you're looking for offensively that could be keys that not a lot of people are talking about necessarily?
Yeah, absolutely. Run the ball is going to be such a key for them, as we mentioned before. And I'll be honest with you, in watching him in training camp, Harrison Bryant is really a guy that's stood out for me only because, Njoku got the big contract and obviously his production is going to have to go up. And I think he'll be a guy that is clearly a target in the red zone and on third downs, what have you. But Bryant just seems to be that guy that quarterbacks are comfortable with. He finds a way to get open. Rarely see him drop the ball. So I think he's somebody that could maybe, be a little bit under the radar that can really help him out. And then, the kicker, Cade York, has absolutely pushed his way into the conversation, not only because the Browns have had some kicking issues over the last couple of years, but this guy's leg is absolutely legitimate. We watched him in practice every day, and he's drilling balls from 50, 60, and 70 yards. And now, granted, that's going to be a little more difficult to do when the wind's blowing down on the lake, but I think it's clearly a weapon that Kevin Stefanski is going to have to think about, his game management now. Does this change the way he views third and fourth downs with where he is on the field because you have a weapon like that? So, there are plenty of other things that they're going to be able to rely on other than Jacoby Brissett, that's for sure.
Yeah, take points when you can get them because you need as many of them as you can possibly get, and this defense should be pretty good. So this is from ESPN.com. NFL executive picks award winners for 2022. Defensive Player of the Year, Myles Garrett, an NFL executive, feels like he hasn't had his signature season yet, and that might be coming. He's got more talent around him and a better secondary, so he could free him up. An NFC team official, nobody's Aaron Donald, but Garrett's got that quality that he can just physically dominate you. One of the few guys you have to account for every moment. Tom, I get exactly what I agree, and I see that. He just has to stay healthy for 17 games.
Yeah, and last year I think 16 sacks is a great number, and then people point out the fact that I think he had one over the last 5 games, and that was supposed to be not up to Myles Garrett's standards, but he did such a good job against the run. He made Clowney better. Clowney made him better. I talked to Myles last week about this. How important is it for him to win Defensive Player of the Year, or potentially an MVP or whatever? And he said that's not what his focus is anymore. It'll be great to be a Pro Bowler, and he'd love to have those things. But what's more important to him now is winning. And he spent this offseason kind of studying others, whether it's Michael Jordan or LeBron James or Tom Brady and the greats. And he's talked a lot about, for him to be legendary, it's going to be up to him to be raising a Vince Lombardi trophy at the end of the season. That's how you're judged, especially when you're one of the greats. And whether that's fair or not, that's the reality of it. And Myles Garrett knows that, and he embraces that now. So, he's gotten bigger, better, and stronger every year, and there's nothing to think that won't be the case for 95 again this season.
Yeah, it will be fun to watch without question. All right, before I let you go, we're going to head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one about the Cavs trade that sent Donovan Mitchell here.
Yeah, hi, this is Rico. I'm just calling in about the Cavs trade of Spidey, Donovan Mitchell. Some fans and especially Knicks fans are trying to convince themselves that we got fleeced. And I don't see it that way. I see it when you feel as an organization you're ready to compete, you use the assets that you have obtained throughout the years and strike while the iron's hot. They got the best available guard on the market, and hopefully, on paper, it looks to be incredible. We'll see what happens. Thanks, guys. Go Cavs.
As always, appreciate all of them. Tom, I don't think they got fleeced at all. They probably went and got the best player on their team, and they got 3 really good ones. And this guy might be just a little bit better because he's further along in his career, and they're all young.
Yeah, it was an all-in move, and I think the biggest thing about it, Dave, is that they didn't have to move any of the other pillars that they have, in Garland, Allen, and Mobley to get him. You basically gave up Lauri Markkanen. I'm not discrediting Lauri at all. He had a really nice year for them last year, and he was a valuable piece because he changed the way, they could run their offense and spread the floor and do some other things. A terrific player and a really good kid. And I'll be honest with you, I was really interested to see how Colin Sexton could potentially fit in with this group, and we just won't see that. So, yeah, I'm with you, Dave. I mean, it was kind of an all-in move. I don't think it necessarily puts them amongst the top 4 teams in the Eastern Conference. I think there's still, an awful lot of talented players and teams that have another notch above them. That's not to say that the Cavs can't move themselves into that conversation, but they're not there yet. It's still going to be a smaller backcourt, 2 guys that are 6'1", so they're going to really have to rely on Mobley and Allen to kind of patrol the baseline and do all the things that they do defensively. So, listen, when you can add, arguably one of the top 15 players in the league, that's not a bad thing. But I still think it's going to take a little bit of time. I think people have to be patient, and I know it's hard for people to have patience around here when you're chasing a title. But I think it's a great move by the Cavs. On Friday afternoon, I was stunned because we had been told by people in New York that the deal was basically just about done with the Knicks. And sure enough, about 2 hours before the first pitch of the Guardians game, I was in scramble mode. So it was good to be busy like that because everybody will kind of remember where they were when Donovan Mitchell landed with the Cavs, right?
Yeah, and you're right. Some of the young guys need to take another half step up, and that puts the Cavs in that level. But you got to see it without question. Tom Withers, as always, man, appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much.
Dave, my pleasure. Nice seeing you.
All right, Tom Withers, make sure you read him. He is a longtime Associated Press reporter here in the Cleveland area. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, Ashley Bastock, Browns beat reporter from the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com. We head back and talk a little bit more Browns. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams. I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
Welcome back to Sports for CLE. We turn our attention back to the Browns, getting ready for the season opener against the Panthers. We're going to head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason, this one about how this fan wants to see the Browns offense work.
Dave, after watching the second half of the Ohio State-Notre Dame game, I hope the Browns offense looks familiar to the Buckeyes attached to the game plan, and for the first 11 games, rely heavy on the effort of our running backs to carry us with their great effort and have the returned. If all this can be accomplished, we'll be in good shape for the return of Deshaun Watson, and hopefully he can finish things up headed to the playoffs.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Let's welcome in Ashley Bastock. She is Browns beat reporter for the Plain-Dealer as well as cleveland.com. What about it, Ashley? Is that the recipe you think Kevin Stefanski is cooking up for a win with Jacoby Brissett as the quarterback?
Well, those are certainly some of the key ingredients, I think, as we're getting our preview content ready. I'll start with the defense because that's actually one of the big stories that I'm writing for our preview content right now is the fact that this defense has to really control takeaways. And that's something they didn't do very well last year. They were in the middle of the pack in the league in regards to those numbers. And I know multiple guys last season, Denzel Ward, Myles Garrett, kind of talked about how those takeaways are contagious, right? Like they kind of tend to stack on top of each other. And I think it's just going to be really key, number one, to obviously stop opposing teams from scoring, but to give Jacoby Brissett and this offense more chances. And yes, I definitely think on offense, the running backs, very important, but I'd also add the offensive line to that. I think this is maybe the best offensive line Jacoby Brissett has played with in his career, so that bodes really well. And a lot of these pieces are just going to have to be clicking on all cylinders while Deshaun Watson is out if the Browns are going to go above 500 during those first 11 games.
Yeah, and an underrated part of that is the kicking game. Cade York and don't forget punter too. You're going to want to play field position. You don't want to put the defense in a bad spot where you're going to have to play from behind. That is what the Browns want to avoid.
Yeah, and Corey Bojorquez, I think, is a guy who I was really interested to talk to after that second preseason game. I grabbed him one-on-one just because, that position battle, I think, was such an underrated position battle for all of camp between him and Joe Charlton, and they obviously ended up going with Corey. He has more experience. He's been with the Packers, with the Bills. So overall, I think he's a guy to keep an eye on. And I'll also add Demetric Felton into that. They just released their first unofficial depth chart, and he's the only return man listed on that depth chart. We've talked so much about how important Jakeem Grant Sr. was going to be to this team, and of course he's out with a season-ending injury now. So all of those things, the special teams aspect of things, I think, is going to be very, very important. Mike Priefer is going to have a lot on his shoulders because, like you said, Dave, field position is going to be so important without Deshaun Watson.
Okay, this is from NFL on CBS, and it's the last two players with 8+ rushing touchdowns in each of their 4 NFL seasons, their first 4 NFL seasons. Nick Chubb is one of them, and Adrian Peterson is the other. So that's pretty good company to be in if you're Nick Chubb.
It is. I think it kind of just goes to show that Nick Chubb, for as good as he is and for as much as Browns fans love him, I really think he might be one of the most underrated players in the league, if you can believe it, and just how important he is. I think a big part of it goes with his personality, his persona. He's a guy who we all know is a bit on the quieter side. He's not very bombastic. He's the guy, who stepped out of bounds instead of scoring a touchdown. I think that kind of perfectly exemplifies who he is and what he's about. But for those reasons, I think a lot of times people forget about just how good he is and the fact that he's in his prime right now. So I'm not surprised that he's in rare company in that stat.
Yeah, I was shocked when I saw that one. All right, let's look a little bit towards the Panthers game. Who are some of the key players that might be getting overlooked? I mean, everybody knows, they're going to have to run the ball with Nick Chubb. Who are some of the people that you're kind of going, we need a couple big games out of these guys?
Yeah, so I think I already mentioned 2 of them in Corey Bojorquez and Demetric Felton on special teams. Those guys are going to be hugely important. I also think I'm watching the offensive line very closely. I'm curious to see, I know we talk about Jed Wills a lot, but I think we've almost kind of moved on from talking about his injury a little bit from last season, that ankle injury he played through. I think this is a huge year for Jed. I won't say it's a make or break year or anything like that. Obviously, he's still on his rookie deal, but it's a big year to kind of prove he can bounce back from that. I'm also going to add Chris Hubbard to that. He's a guy who the Browns really missed last year at that swing tackle spot. And he's been dealing with injuries again this preseason. So I'm curious to see if he can stay healthy. I think he's going to be really important if, God forbid, something happens on that offensive line again. And then a guy that I'm perpetually watching, I'm going to add Donovan Peoples-Jones into the mix here. He's listed on the depth chart as a starter opposite of Amari Cooper. I think this is a big year for Donovan, again, to kind of show that he can grow and be a true starting receiver on this team, because I do think while there's not questions about what he can do exactly, I don't blame people for questioning if he can be a starter in this league or if he's maybe just a really good backup and that's his ceiling. But this is a big time for him to prove that he can make big plays. And this Browns offense is really going to need somebody besides Amari Cooper to be doing that in that receiver room.
Yeah, there's an opportunity without question. And, last year I think he had a lot kind of thrown at him just with the injuries. So it will be interesting to see how DPJ handles it. Ashley Bastock from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com, and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we'll look at some free agents that are still out there. We will also take a look at a ceiling and a floor for the Browns, according to ESPN.com. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
We continue talking Browns with Ashley Bastock from the Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. This is according to the Bleacher Report. The free agent contracts the Browns must pursue after preseason. They start with defensive tackle Linval Joseph, 12-year veteran, two-time Pro Bowler, would bring a veteran presence to the interior of Cleveland's defensive line. Wide receiver Emanuel Sanders, one of the most experienced wide receivers still on the free agent market, 12-year veteran, including last year, 42 catches, 626, 4 touchdowns, 14 games for the Bills. And the third one, wide receiver D.D. Westbrook, 28-year-old, a lot of speed and return experience, 69 punts and 7 kickoff returns. Those aren't touchdowns. Those are just returns during his 5-year career. Ashley, any of those interest you? Any of them intriguing to the point you think the Browns might look at them?
I honestly don't really think so at this point. I'm not anticipating this big move, especially to come at receiver, like I think a lot of people were hoping for. Like even I said, have advocated for them doing, because I feel like this room still feels a veteran receiver short, even though it's gotten kind of crowded, like towards the bottom of the depth chart. So I don't know that they are intrigued enough to make a move at either of these spots. I definitely don't think at defensive tackle we're going to see much movement there, because they've kind of shown time and time again that it's not a position they value money-wise. Like, they don't want to throw a lot of money at their D tackles because of what the position means analytically. And I just don't think we're going to see this front office really make a big move there. Like, they're okay with, doing a draft pick on the third day, like they did for Perry and Winfrey, and using it there. But I just don't think we're going to see a big free agent, wow, kind of move come from them at that D tackle spot. And receiver, I just think they kind of like the guys they have, even though they're young guys and they're kind of unproven. I think they feel like they have some diamonds in the rough here with David Bell, with Michael Woods II even. I think expect him to play because he was having a really nice camp prior to that hamstring injury that he re-aggravated. So overall, I don't know. I wouldn't be opposed to them getting a veteran receiver and adding that more experience in the room, but I just don't really think it's going to be feasible at this point.
Yeah, I agree with you. I get the sense that I don't think they're going to move in either area unless there's an injury. This one is from NFL.com, and it lists the floor and the ceiling for every NFL team. For the Browns, they list the ceiling at 9.8 wins, the floor at 6. And I've said it again, the floor at 6 wins, there would have to be a whole lot that goes wrong for the Browns to only win 6 games. And the ceiling, even at 9-8, even with Jacoby Brissett playing 11, that seems a little low to me too. I mean, if you tell me 10 or 11, I'd probably buy it, but 9-8, I don't know.
Yeah, so I keep coming back to the 9-8 record. Like, that's what I think is very feasible for this team without, it might be a little optimistic, but it's not the most optimistic you can go. And what I'm accounting for when I say 9-8, I'm actually giving Jacoby Brissett and this team the benefit of the doubt to be able to go 6-5 without Deshaun Watson. And I have them going like 3-3 when Deshaun Watson comes back, because I'm just assuming, I'm being realistic here, and thinking Deshaun Watson might not look like a top 5 quarterback in the league, like we know that he has the talent to be. Coming back after, not playing for so long, for almost 2 full years. I think it's 23 months that he'll have been in a real NFL game at that point. So, I think it's going to take some time to get back up to speed. He put in a lot of work in the preseason, in OTAs, in training camp, and got those reps in. But since he's not allowed to be with the team at all until mid-October, they're not even allowed to have any contact with him. I think it's going to take some time, and there might be some growing pains there. But I think a winning record is still feasible. I think if you are at 9 wins, the playoffs kind of become a bit more of a question. You're maybe not in control of your own destiny at that point and need some things to fall your way. But I definitely think this team could go over 500, and I'm with you. 6 wins seems really, really low. And at that point, I'm like, if Jacoby Brissett has only won like 3 games or something, are they even staying with Jacoby Brissett at that point? Maybe we would throw Josh Dobbs in there, which is something I've said. I mean, Josh Dobbs looked pretty dynamic in the preseason. I think this team would kind of problem solve their way around things if the record was really, really atrocious to start out.
Yeah, I would agree with you. All right, before I let you go, so John Breach, CBS Sports, picked all of the games. Week 1 pick, he has the Panthers defeating the Browns 19-16. Although I admit I considered picking the Browns in this game, I remember they haven't won a regular season opener since 2014. 17 seasons, they've gone 0-16-1. I would like to point out to John Breach, Baker Mayfield's never won an opener because he's only been with the Browns. To be honest with you, I think if they hold the Panthers to 19 points, they win this game.
That's what I was thinking too. I was going to say, like, the worst part about playing the Panthers now is you're kind of catching them at the worst time, which is before Christian McCaffrey is injured or something like that, right? Like, they're going to have him on the field. So that's unfortunate. And obviously Baker Mayfield is going to be healthy as well after dealing with the shoulder injury last year. But I still think on paper, the Browns are a better team talent-wise. And I think John Johnson III was the one who said it this week that, well, there's 11 of us and 1 of Baker in terms of who knows who better. So I really do think this defense has an edge in that regard, but it's definitely going to be an interesting battle. I'm with you, though. I think if they hold them to under 3 scores, they have a very good chance of winning that first opener since 2004.
Ashley Bastock, as always, thanks so much for the time and the insight. Appreciate it very much, Ashley.
Thank you.
All right, Ashley Bastock, make sure reader, Pages of the Plain Dealer, as well as cleveland.com for Browns coverage. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We will see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.